Let's pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day and for the blessings we've received thus far. Dear Lord, be with Jim as he blesses the Bible, delivers it to us, dear Lord, that we may be better followers of you, dear God. Be with those that are sick and in need of thy watch care, as we ask in Jesus' name.
Amen. Turn to Revelation, the 18th chapter. Revelation chapter 18. Now, last Wednesday night, of course, the only one that was here from last Wednesday night is Roger. So, Roger, you get a little recap on this. The title of the message is The Devil's Whore. And this is the great horror revelation that we're talking about. The great horror revelation is a real system, isn't it? Is it a real system? It's a real system that's going to rule the world. It's going to be an economic, religious, and governmental system. It's going to be, and this system is a religious system. And this is going to be the bride of the devil, the bride of Satan himself, the bride of Satan. Now let's go back and prostitutes, whores, they're also called in the more polite company courtesans. Courtesans. We have a courtesan in the lineage of Christ. Who was that courtesan? Who was she? Who met the people when the spies went into Jericho? What was the woman's name? Rahab. All right, so we have Rahab. We find out in the history of Israel we had another famous courtesan. Her name was Jezebel. What was her husband's name? Ahab, but she played around. She was playing. She was many times now, a courtesan was a prostitute. A prostitute is an actor. A prostitute is an actor, an actress. Now, in history, how many of you ever seen these belly dancers and things? That's what they were. All right? Now, we go on a little bit further, and we find Herodias. What was Herodias? Her mother was married to Phillips, Herod's brother. Herod took her from him. She was a courtesan. She courted politically. Many times these wives were prostitutes. They were courtesans. They were trained to be witty and have real good humor. And they were educated in politics and in history and all these things. In the Japanese culture, they have what? Geisha girls. These geisha girls are courtesans. They're escorts for the rich. Okay? So this is an old story. Okay? And in history, there were many, many Jewish courtesans. Many Jewish courtesans. Of course, we have Herodias. Herodias danced. Now, what they would do, these courtesans would go entertain, and they would go sleep with the biggest guy, big shot, who was ever putting on the feast. Herod promised her what? Because of her abilities to entertain and dance, he just flipped out over this little courtesan, which was his stepdaughter. And what did he promise her? Remember what he promised her? Up to half of my kingdom. Okay. Then we have Mary Magdalene. Here we go. Good. Mary Magdalene was a courtesan. Mary Magdalene was a famous courtesan, and she from Magdala, and she was quite an entertainer. But how many demons did she have in her? How many? 7 demons. She was demonically inspired. Many of these courtesans were demonically inspired. All right. But Mary Magdalene got saved, didn't she? Remember when she got saved, what did she do? Last Wednesday night we were studying in the 12th chapter of John, and we see Mary of Bethany anointing Jesus' feet and crying just like Mary Magdalene did back at the other anointing of Jesus. There were 2 different anointings of Jesus, and 2 different reasons. Mary Magdalene anointed Jesus' feet and cried, and was all broken up because she was a whore. She was a prostitute. She was a courtesan. She was rich. Courtesans can get very rich. They're usually educated, very educated. Down through Jewish history, we're going to find out that many of the Jewish people in different parts of the world, especially Europe, Germany, France, Italy, England, they trained their daughters to be courtesans, prostitutes. Very well educated. They were artists, they were singers, they were musicians. And they played to the public to get political favors. All right? And money. All right? Political favors and money. Mata-Hari. How many of you ever heard of Mata-Hari?
I think so.
Huh? Mata-Hari. She was a courtesan during World War I. What happened to Mata-Hari?
Executed.
Huh?
Executed.
She was executed. She shot by firing squad. She was sleeping on both sides of the river. On both sides. In World War I. Okay? Then there was one of the most famous courtesans of all time. She was a movie actress. She became a movie actress. Her name was Yule. Yule. She was Jewish. She was born in 1844. October the 22nd or 23rd, 1844. Her name was Rosine Bernhardt. She became known as Sarah Bernhardt. How many of you have heard of Sarah Bernhardt? They say the greatest actress in the 1800s and the early 1900s. You can even see her on films and silent movies. She was a silent film actress. She was a great vocalist. She was an actress, bar none. Her mother trained her and her sister to become prostitutes, courtesans. She worked in royalty from about 1862 to nearly 1900. And she became extremely wealthy. Henry, Prince of Belgium, had a baby by her. He wanted to marry her, but his family said, no, you're not marrying that courtesan. Okay? Then she had an affair with Prince Edward VII of the Prince of Scotland, the Prince of Wales, you know, that would become king one day of England. All right? She had an affair with him. And she became very, very famous. She was an atheist. She was an atheist. She didn't believe in God at all. Okay? This Sarah Bernhardt. Her stage career went from 1862 to 1922. That's a long time. Her stage career was 1862 to 1922. Here was a very famous courtesan. A very famous courtesan. Now, remember what was happening in Europe? Now, she lived in France, which was the most liberal nation toward the Jewish people. Did you know that? France was the most liberal nation toward the Jewish people. She was forced to be baptized a Catholic when she was 12 years old, and she did plays that were absolutely arrogantly against God. She did one play in New York in 1910, and she played in this play, and there was Mary Magdalene was originally a courtesan of Pontius Pilate in her play. She wrote this play and everything. Then Pontius Pilate, she left Pontius Pilate, and she went from one man to the other, and finally down to, she was Herod, and then all the way down to Jesus. In the meanwhile, before Jesus, she was Judas Iscariot's courtesan. And so Judas Iscariot, when she left him and went to Jesus, he got real mad, and that's the whole story. Now, she did this in New York play one night, and that never was shown again. It was so radically degradational, derogatory to Christianity. Finally, before she died, she asked for a Catholic priest to come and give her last rites. But all of her life, she lived to be 78 years old. She had one child, Maurice, and he lived from 1864 to about 1928. She even had her leg cut off. She jumped on the stage and broke her leg. It didn't heal, so they cut it off, and she performed and did plays one of the greatest actors. They called her Sarah the Divine, the greatest actress that ever lived, they said. Prostitutes are actresses, aren't they? She chose the right profession, didn't she? What about the one in Revelation? This actress in Revelation. This actress in Revelation. This actress is going to be the religious, economic, governmental system under the Antichrist. Now, who is Jesus' bride? Who is Jesus' bride? The church. The true New Testament church is Christ's bride. Now, the bride of the Antichrist is this religious, economic, governmental system. That's his bride. Jesus died for his bride. The devil's going to destroy his bride. He's going to devastate her. And that's what's happening here in the 18th chapter of the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 18. Now, I want you to remember something that I've taught before. Man is what? We're what? Triune, aren't we? We're triune. How can you explain triune? Young lady, how about triune? That guy there sitting next to you, what part of him do you see? That's his physical expression there, his body in it. All right? But is that all of him there is? You know that guy has got, he's the 2 parts software and 1 part hardware. So are all of us. Brother Abe, you listen to this? All of us are 2 parts software and 1 part hardware. What is hardware in computers?
In computers?
What is the hardware?
Memory?
Huh?
Memory?
No. What's hardware?
Monitor, keyboard.
Physical, tangible.
Oh,
The computer, the housing, all of this, the hard drive, all of this. This is hardware. What is software? This information in it. Information. You can't touch it. You can't touch software. Now, man is what? He's hardware, 1 part hardware, and 2 parts software. Is he not? You are physical. That's your body. That body is tangible. That body is terminal in this life. Okay? But your 2 parts software. What is the software in man? The soul and the spirit. So, where hardware is our body. And the software is the soul and the spirit. Okay? Man is 2/3 software, 1/3 hardware. How powerful is the 2/3 over the hardware? Hardware's hard to get around sometimes, isn't it? It sure gives us a lot. Our hardware sure gives us a lot of trouble, doesn't it? It burns out. It's going the wrong direction all the time. Everything we want to do, it's just that way, isn't it? Now, when a person is lost and they don't know the Lord, that hardware runs the whole system. Did you know that? The hardware runs the whole system. The Adamic nature runs the spirit and the soul, does it not? Now let's go to the old. Let's go to God first. God. God is 2 parts software, 1 part hardware. Okay? 2 parts software, 1 part hardware. What's the hardware of God?
Jesus.
Huh?
Jesus.
Jesus. That's our Savior, Jesus. Okay? What is the software in God? The Father and the Spirit. All right. Now let's go to the devil. Can you understand things just a little bit better here? What we're dealing with in the last days now. Now let's go to the devil. We call him Lucare, or Lucifer, a Hillel, Diabolos, all of these names, that's what he is. Okay? The devil. The devil is also triune. You know, angels are triune. A lot of people say they're dual. but angels are triune. Do angels have a physical expression? Are they tangible? The only thing that we know about angels, why we think they're a spirit, is because they can travel between dimensions. Zip, 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 zip. But in every dimension where they are visible, they have a tangible body, a physical presence. All right? And of course, Satan. Let's look at Satan. Satan. Will Satan have a body in this world that's tangible? The Antichrist himself. All right? Now, we saw the fulfillment of God. Did Christ have a pre-incarnate form? Did Christ have a pre-incarnate form? Did Christ have a pre-incarnate form? Tell me where it was. Where did anybody ever see Christ in his pre-incarnate form? Jehovah is who Christ is. Jehovah's Christ.
When he visited Abraham.
When he visited Abraham, when he wrestled with Jacob, when he walked in the garden with Adam and Eve. These are physical, but then he became flesh, real flesh. When is Satan going to become tangible feast for flesh? Sarx,
When he becomes
in the Antichrist. Okay. Now, he's going to have a body, the body made of a woman. Jesus Christ had a body made of a woman, made under the law. Why does it say made under the law?
Sins.
Because he had to be our kinsman redeemer. Now the Lucifer, Satan, Diabolos, the devil, Abaddon, the destroyer, this evil one, he will cohabit with a woman and he will bring forth a physical counterpart. The Antichrist. Will he still have spirit and a soul of evil?
Yes.
Yeah. This man will be triune. This man will be unredeemable. This man will be on this earth. This man may be on this earth right now. Could be. People ask me every day, how far close to the end do you think we are? And I said, well, I've been around for a while. I wrote my doctor's thesis on Doctor Bible Languages in 1980 on the book of Revelation. I thought we were real close to the end in 1980. That's 1980, 1990, 2000, 2010. Here we are in 2014. Decades later. You know what? I thought 1980 that was real close. But we go on decades. It could be decades more. But I can tell you this one thing, that everything is in exactly the place where it ought to be. Every nation is exactly lining up exactly like it's supposed to be. Period. Okay? Every day on the radio, when I'm out talking on the radio, people say, oh, they'll get in here and they talk about the blood moons and everything else. And well, you remember the Aztec calendar? Remember Harold camping and all this kind of stuff? I remember back in 1975, I think it was, when the Jehovah's Witnesses prophesied the end of the world. Herbert Armstrong, the end of the world. Well, you know what? The end of the world's coming. I don't prophesy it's going to happen any time. All I do is say it's going to happen. Everything's in the right place. The leaders are in the right place. Everything. Israel's got to have their Messiah that's going to get them out of trouble. They need to get out of trouble right now, don't they? They're in a lot of trouble. That's right. They're in a lot of trouble. The first day they were declared a nation, May the 14th, 1948, 5 Arab nations attacked them that day. They whooped the socks off them. They think they're mighty. I guarantee you they're not mighty. They're not mighty. They're not just. They're not truthful. Don't think they're any of those things. But they're God's elect. That's the only thing. They're God's elect. God will use them. But before he can use them, he's going to have to kill 2 out of every 3 of them. That's all I can say about that. They're going to 2 out of every 3 are going to get killed. All right. Let's look in the 18th chapter now. Meditate. Say meditate. That's how it starts off in Greek, metatons. After these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority. Exousia, authority. What kind of authority is that? Remember, Roger, what exousia means? Remember what that means? Brother Mike, you remember that word? That's quite a word. That means license to do anything. You have no control, no limits, nothing, unlimited power. That's what exousia means. A lot more than that. Coming down out of heaven, having authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And I cried, and he cried out with a mighty voice, saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, and she has become a dwelling place of demons. False religion is a dwelling place of demons. Mary Magdalene was a very powerful, influential woman, and she had 7 fallen spirits dwelling in her, and Jesus cast them out, and she was so thankful that she poured all of her wealth upon him, her burial ointment, her tears, wiped his feet with her hair of her head, and the hair that she had made cloth, tassel doilies out of. Babylon the Great has become a dwelling place of demons. Every false religious system has demonic influence. From Joseph Smith or Herbert Armstrong, Mary Ellen White, Mary Baker Eddy, all of these people had demonic influence. Joseph Smith, Herbert Armstrong, Mohammed. A dwelling place of demons, a prison of every unclean spirit, and a prison of every unclean, hateful bird. A prison. What is a prison? What's a prison? What is a prison? Incarcerated. Incarceration. A prison. In the Old Testament, you know, they didn't have prisons. If a man committed a terrible crime and he could get away, he could go to a city of refuge, and he had to self-imprison himself in the city of refuge. He had to make his own living. They didn't pay for those people. They didn't have any budget for prisons. They had to go to work and stay right there and behave themselves in this community. I remember when they were interviewing my stepfather, remember Dale Remley? He said, cages aren't for people, but he said some people have to be caged. Some of them are bad. But he said, and they said, what's an alternative to the average prison? He said, colonies. Cities of refuge, self-imposed imprisonments. You couldn't leave there. You left there, you were a dead man. A prison, an incarceration. In this religious system is where these terrible demons live and breathe. They're there. They even try to get in God's churches every now and then. You know that? I've seen some church members. I've seen a few deacons in some of God's churches. I think maybe they slipped out of false religion. They might have been theologically sound, but they were ungodly buzzards. Every unclean and hateful bird, for all the nations have drunk of the wine of the passion of her immorality. All nations. Now this is the devil's whore, the devil's courtesan, the devil's bride. She has fornicated with all the nations with her religious fornication. Some very primitive Baptist churches and some what we call Orthodox Baptist churches, in primitive Baptist churches, the Catholic Church started marriages by a license and burials by a license and baptism by a license and all this kind of business to control the masses. That's why they did that. Now, Baptists have fought legal marriages up until the 20th century, about the halfway mark. They didn't want their people to go out and get marriage license. Now we're just lined up with the rest of the ungodly world. We do that. But at one time, still today in primitive Baptist churches, if you get a license and get married by the state, they will exclude you for spiritual fornication forever. You're out. Period. In some of these Baptist churches, if you go in fellowship with another Baptist church or some other kind of church, they will exclude you for spiritual fornication. There's a little truth to some of that. nations have drunk of the wine of her passions. What kind of passions do people have? What kind of passions? What kind of passions do you have? What kind of desire? What kind of lust do you have? Money? Power? Sexuality? These are the things that make the world tick, aren't they? And those in power, you know how many politicians are morally pure? How many? Can you name any? In history? You go back and you're going to open up a can of worms, people. That's what you're going to do. You're going to open up a can of worms in every one of them, so to speak. Except probably for Woodrow Wilson. He tried to make the world the kingdom of God. Passion of her immorality, and the kings of the earth had committed acts of immorality with her, and merchants. And the earth has become rich by the wealth of her sensuality. This church had the keys to power. This church has the keys to wealth. This church has the keys to success. We know that under the Antichrist system, you're going to have the mark of the beast, aren't you, to get a job, to do anything. And the upper echelon, what does the upper echelon do? They pull the strings. Remember the movie The Godfather a long time ago? The first one came out. It had this puppet, this guy with a hand with a puppet down below. It's so, the world is so much like that. In all reality, there's truth in everything. The wealth of her sensuality. Now we know that there's two great world systems, ungodly world systems in the world today of religion. Two great ones. Great and powerful ones. There are a lot of little cults and isms. Jehovah's Witnesses is a cult and ism. But you know, the Jehovah's Witnesses really don't have any threat except spiritual threat to the people of the world. Do you know that? The Jehovah's Witnesses will never be an economic or a political threat to society. Is that good? Bad? Spiritual is real bad, though, isn't it? People get to go to hell by the millions believing in that. How about Herbert Armstrong? Herbert Armstrong tried to line up with the politics. You know, he used to give money away. Garner Ted Armstrong. These names, probably some of you don't even know. The Worldwide Church of God. They bought. You know, he would go have a picture taken with Bacon or somebody. He'd give him $250,000 donation to take a picture with him. So they'd take a picture, you know. You'd see him standing up there with his $50,000 cufflinks and high tack. And his $1,000 suits, things like that. Wealth, 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 wealth. How about Islam? Do you think Islam's a threat to the peace of the world? Any way, shape, fashion, or form. How about Catholicism? Do you think Catholicism is a threat to the world system? Yeah. How about you combine those two and what do you got? Super threats. Like super viruses and things. The wealth of sensuality. And I've heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people." There are some people, you know, that are in there that don't have the mark in the beginning of it. That you may not participate in her sins, that you may not receive her plagues. Who is this people that he's talking about? Israel. Israel. Some of the Israel. 2/3 of Israel will be killed. God's got to get their attention. I'm going to tell you something. Everything's going over there in the Middle East right now. Them people are killing each other because they like to kill each other. They kill each other's kids, they kill each other's mamas, they kill each other's daddies, and they sneer behind each other's backs. Because that's exactly what they want to do. They've been doing it for 4,000 years. For her sins have piled up high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Now this is what you call lex talionis. I mentioned that last week. Lex talionis, that's Latin. Brother, Dr. John, did you learn any Latin? No, not much Latin. Lex talionis, that means paybacks. Paybacks. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever man sows, that same thing shall he also receive. Under the law of Moses, if you stole somebody's property, how much do you have to pay back? Sevenfold. So guess what? She's going to get paybacks. Payback. Payback. Number 6, pay her back even as she has paid. Give back her double according to her deeds. In the cup of which she has mixed, mix twice as much for her. Twice as strong. This prostitute of old, this prostitute that's come all the way down to the ages, that finally marries up with her lover, the Antichrist, he's going to turn his back on her. You know, the book of Daniel says he'll have no desire for women, but this is a spiritual woman. She is a system. The book, or the parables of Matthew 13, how many of you studied them with me? Anybody? Nobody. Need to go do them. Parables of Matthew 13. Remember the parable of the mustard plant, which became the mustard tree? Okay? And the parable of the sower. The parable of the mustard plant that became a mustard tree. A mustard tree is a monstrosity. This is the mustard tree. And then we have the Lord sowing seed. And we have His church sowing seed. And what happens when the seed is sown, the Word of God, it's either tainted, poisoned, or something. And who does it? Who are these little creatures, these little womblies that run around stealing the seed? The birds. The dirty birds that ate up the seed. Who were they?
Devil and his
The devils. They're devil's helpers. Demonic religions. How many of you ever tried to lead a Mormon to the Lord? You've got to get God in their head first. They don't know who God is. They think they're God. They think God is an exalted human. How do you talk to somebody like that? I mean, talk to Jehovah's Witnesses and they think Jehovah is the Father and Jesus is Michael the Archangel. You know, that's a problem. That's a real problem. But you can at least say they believe in the Scriptures, or they make use of them for their own doctrines and things. But you might be able to get some of them out of there. I saw one here was converted this morning. Just walked by here. This morning I talked to him. He's still faithful in God's churches. He was a Jehovah's Witness for many years. Out there trying to bring in the kingdom, working for his salvation. It's hard to lead people to the Lord when their hearts and their minds and their souls have been poisoned with false religion. To the degree that she glorified herself and lived sensuously, to the same degree give her torment and mourning. For she says in her heart, I'll sit as a queen, and I am not a widow, and I will never see mourning. You know, when this false religious system, and it is Judaism, Catholicism, and probably Islam, when it all lines up together, each one of them think they're going to get a good deal from the other. How in the world are they going to make peace? How are they going to make peace where they coexist together? Well, the powers of Satan. For this reason, in one day her plagues will come, pestilence and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire. For the Lord God, Jehovah Elohim, who judges, He is strong. Now, verse number 9, and the kings of the earth who committed acts of immorality and lived sensuously with her. Who are these kings of the earth that's talking about here? These are all the nations that are under the Antichrist and under his political, religious, economic, governmental system. Will weep and lament over her when they see the smoke of her burning. Standing at a distance because of fear of her torment, saying, woe, woe. It's uah in Greek, which is a little particle of mourning, an explanation of terror. Terror, terror, woe, woe. Her torment saying, woe, woe, the great city Babylon. It is a religious system. It's actually tangible. This system is tangible. Like hardware. It has hardware. And it has software. The city has hardware and software. Where does the software, where did the inspiration for all of this demonic systems come? From Satan himself. Verse number 11, and the merchants of the earth weep and mourn over her because no one buys her cargoes anymore. The system is going to go bankrupt. The Mormons plan for 7 years of doom. They have to have 7 years worth of groceries and gold and silver. Gold and silver won't do you one bit of good in the tribulation period. You may as well burn it. Use it up. Wear it all over your ears and head. Make gold hats and stuff with it, because it's not going to do you one bit of good there. Not a bit of good. The Antichrist will confiscate every bit of ammunition. People are saying, invest in gold and lead bullets, to protect themselves during this period of time. Forget it. It's going to be completely controlled. Cargoes of gold and silver, precious stones, pearls and fine linen, pearl and silk and scarlet, and every kind of citron wood. What is citron wood? What is citron wood? Brother Mike, you know what citron wood is?
Citron?
Uh-huh.
No.
Anybody know what citron wood is?
Are you in 12?
Huh? I'm in the 12th verse. Citron means a strong aromatic wood. Cedar chest. Yeah, cedar chest. Anything that smells and has great, cedar. And every article of ivory and every article made from very costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble. And cinnamon and spice and incense and perfume and frankincense and wine and olive oil and fine flour and wheat and cattle and sheep and cargoes of horses and chariots. There you go, the automobiles. Automobile industry, you're not going to be able to save it during this time. And slaves. There will be a lot of human slaves. You know that almost every nation in the world still has slaves? All what we call the uncivilized nations, they still have slaves. Big business here still has slaves. When you look at it like that. Slaves in human lives. And the fruit you longed for has gone from you, and all the things that were luxurious and splendid have passed away from you, and men will no longer find them. There's not going to be any riches. People that have lived at the top, people in 1929 in America, things were rolling. You know, when that demise actually began was in Andrew Jackson's time. He set America in such a depression that it finally culminated in 1929. It went on, boy, for a long time. It went on. And when the people that were rich, when they found out they had no money in New York City, many of them lived in New York City, that's where the bright lights and everything were, what did they do? You remember? They jumped out of windows. Instead of being poor, they couldn't stand it, so they committed suicide. The merchants of these things who have become rich will stand at an instant because of fear of her torment, weeping and mourning, saying, Woe, woe, the great city, she who was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, all of New York City, all of Tel Aviv, all of wherever. They're going to be bankrupt. Flat on their backs, broke. The system's going to be nothing. In the United States alone, when Franklin Roosevelt called in the gold, he called in at a certain price. You had to render your gold. You had to surrender it. You couldn't buy anything with it all. It was worthless. That happened in history, didn't it? You don't think it can happen again? It's going to happen again. That's what the book says. For in 1 hour, a short period of time, great wealth has been laid waste. And every shipmaster and every passenger and sailor, as many as make their living by the sea, stood at a distance and were crying out as they saw the smoke of her burning. What city is like the great city? What city is like this great nation that we have so much pride in? It's going to fall. And they threw dust on their heads and were crying out and weeping and mourning, saying, Woe, woe is the great city in which all who have ships at sea become rich by her wealth. For in 1 hour she has been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven, you saints, and apostles and prophets, because God has pronounced judgment for you against her. God's people mainly have lived in poverty down through the ages. You studied 2,000 years of church history. Matter of fact, on those websites I told you about, you know what's #1 downloads? Church history. People are waking up. Hundreds and hundreds of downloads a day. Every few minutes, church history number 16, church history number 10, church history number 11, church history, church history, church history, church history. They're getting acquainted with what's going on. Church history is going to be fulfilled here. Church history will end right here. Then we'll have tribulation here. This is what we're talking about here. These are the ones that have been raptured up, have been taken out of the way. And a strong angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, "Thus will Babylon, the great city, the great religious system, is going to be bankrupt." She controlled, the religious system controlled the wealth of the world and the economy of the world. "Thus will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence, and will not be found any longer." Jeremiah 51 and 61 onward talks about this. "The sound of harpists and musicians and flute players and trumpeters will no longer be heard in her." No more beautiful orchestras. Baptists are weird people, you know that in history. When the Protestant Reformation began, the Catholics, these people came out of the Catholic Church protesting. We had Luther and we had Calvin and all of these people protesting. And they still built their churches, and of all the great Mozart and Bach and all those people that wrote all of these fine, beautiful orchestrations of music, Baptists were sitting back and looking at these people. This must be the Antichrist. Look at how they're building these beautiful cathedrals and everything else. They were going out there and meeting in shanties. Real churches were. And when they put these pulpits up in these churches where the pastor stood up there and preached over the congregation, and the sound for acoustics was made where they could hear a pastor talk, and of course they had a couple of deacons or presbyters with long sticks thumping the other ones on the head if they snored or whatever. They woke them up. All the babies, bam! Knock them in the head. Keep them quiet. Because sounds echoed in these churches. Have you ever been in these? The Baptists preached and made their pastor preach up to them. They dug a hole and made him preach up to them. Because he was a servant, not a master. He wasn't a potentate. He was a servant of the people. Your flute players and trumpeters will no longer be heard any longer. No craftsmen. When Alexander Campbell, when he came to America, he was a theologian. He had a doctor's degree in languages and all that kind of stuff here. He came here and he lined up with Baptists in America. And one thing that Baptists at that time still would not have music in their churches, not instrumental music, because of the great concerts in the big cathedrals in Europe. And you know, the Church of Christ still doesn't have any music in their services today. They kept that. In primitive Baptists, they will not have any music in their churches. Still remembering the Protestant Reformation. And Luther and Calvin and all of those great orchestras and big organs and everything. Instead of spending money on organs, they spent money on missionaries. Any craft will be found in her any longer, and the sounds of the mill will not be heard in you any longer, and the light of the lamp will not shine in you any longer, and the voice of the bridegroom and the bride will not longer be heard any longer, for your merchants were the great men of the earth. They were the great movers and shakers of the earth. Because of all the nations were deceived by your drug abuse and sorcery. Drugs, alcohol, runs the world. And sorcery, ungodly, demonic influence. And in her was found the blood of prophets and the saints and of all who have been slain in the earth. Next week, 19th chapter. Boy, we get good news next week. Good news, we get to go to heaven for a little while. Walk up into heaven. Today we studied the triuneness of the Antichrist. The triuneness of his kingdom. The triuneness of God. And the triuneness, the hardware and the software of man and Satan and this world religious system. All right. Do you have any questions? With Mia? Nothing? All right. Who's going to do this? Bill, you're going to come up here? Let me turn these machines off.
Okay.
You know,